Hello, everybody. I am so thrilled to have my guest here today, Kastle Donovan. And I want to introduce you to her. She's an amazing woman. She is a family nurse practitioner with over 13 years of experience here in Annapolis, Maryland. Her journey in healthcare, especially her work on the front lines during the pandemic, shows just how committed and resilient she is. These qualities also shaped a big decision she made at a young age to remove alcohol from her life. So today we'll talk about what led her to that choice and how it's impacted her life and who she is now because of that choice. So she's now living in Highland Beach with her husband and her two boys. And this blew my mind. Kastle is also an ice hockey player and a marathon runner. So I definitely want to hear about that. Living a full life of strength and wellness, which is what your sober fit life is all about. So welcome, Kastle.
Thank you so much, Maureen. I have been looking forward to this all summer. And I really just want to also thank you for giving us a platform to talk about this. It's a difficult subject, I think, for a lot of people to talk about and bring up. It can be very taboo. And, I've
Mhm.
been encouraged in recent times about the trend that we're kind of headed towards, I think, where we're really starting to explore more about whether or not alcohol has deserves a place in our lives, to the degree that it does for a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're
Um,
coming into a good time where the sober curiosity piece and people are starting to understand, and the science is coming out more and more about how it's just really in no way beneficial for us. But when you made the decision, it was a long time ago when you were a kid, right? And
yeah,
you
yeah, and
said
I
20
was
years
just
ago, I think. So I'd love to hear, your
absolutely
story.
sure. So yeah, I cannot believe that I've just come up on 20 years. It
That's amazing.
seems really like it was another life. I mean, almost sometimes like a dream. And there was a good portion of my late teens and early 20s where I really did feel like I was just kind of in a alcohol induced haze of a
Yeah.
dream. You know, I I never set out to, with the intent of stopping drinking. I was probably pretty standard for the average person. I think in America, average young person kind of started to experiment with alcohol in your late teens, maybe in your later years of high school. And, it's all fun and games. You would meet up in a parking lot and just kind of
Right.
weekend stuff, nothing regular. What ended up going to college, I grew up out in California in the East Bay and then went to college on the East Coast here at GW. And in retrospect, being that far away from my parents, that was the goal. That's what I wanted.
Right.
But it ultimately, I think for me, was a little too far. I mean, this was back before people had cell phones
Right.
and regular internet. And it wasn't something that necessarily facilitated a relationship with my parents. And I spent a lot of my time at George Washington University partying.
Yeah.
And I remember coming home from my break and at Christmas time, and my dad saying, "Wow, look at you! You've gained a lot of weight. You look puffy." And I was like,
Ooh,
"Oh," and he
freshman
said, "You must
10.
be drinking a lot." Yeah, exactly, and that's certainly what it was. And I found as I got through my 4 years of college, and I did graduate in 4 years, and I had a decent GPA and everything.
Yeah.
I winged a lot of it, and I wonder in retrospect if I had really kind of applied myself, how well I could have done. But I started to notice trends with my drinking where I would wake up with incredible feelings of guilt.
Mhm.
And it wasn't the version of myself that I wanted to be. And I guess I didn't really know who I was or who I wanted to be at the time. And I was 23 years old when I finally made the decision to stop drinking altogether. And again, it was spurred by this overwhelming feeling that alcohol was making me be someone I didn't want to be, and that I didn't have a great deal of control over who I was when I was under the influence.
So
And
let me ask you there, you're 23, you're obviously drinking with a bunch of friends. Were you talking to them about this concern, or was this whole sort of an internal monologue you were having with yourself?
this was really an internal monologue, and a lot of that was driven by, I think, the relationship with peers at the time, where everyone's on the same page as you are. Everyone is partying to the same
Right.
extent I was, and I had a lot of people say to me, "You're not doing anything outside the norm. Like you don't have a problem with alcohol." And ultimately, it was my own mom who said to me, "If you don't feel good about who you are when you're drinking, you have a problem with alcohol. So what are you going to do about it?"
She was way ahead of
And
her time with that statement.
way ahead of her time.
Way
Yeah.
ahead of her
And
time.
Yeah, and it was her recommendation that, maybe you go to AA, maybe you need to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I thought, I'm still going to work. I'm still,
Right.
I make a living. I pay my bills. Like, I don't really have a problem. But again, it all came back to what my threshold of tolerance
Hmm.
was for what I was willing to be, and who, again, getting back to this question of, is this the best version that I can be for myself and for my
Right.
future self? And I was increasingly, again, seeing patterns with the drinking where, it would involve driving, or,
Hmm.
reckless spending with the credit card, not finding my wallet, or it was at the bar where I left it the next morning, stuff like that, and that
Yeah.
shamed me. I felt a lot of shame about that. So I didn't want to live that way. I didn't want to, be that person. So
I
that's
have
ultimately
to
what.
stop you there though, because I just think that's incredible at 23, because I was feeling the same way. But you really made a mature choice. And I love how you said you were thinking about your future self. Again, that's a very mature
Mhm.
thought to be having. So, when you first
Yeah,
told me you did this, you kind of glossed over it. I'm like, that's amazing that you did this.
yeah, and
So at 23,
it was
so I wanted
wonderful.
you to share, because there's probably a lot of young people out there in
Yeah,
college who are
exactly.
struggling with this, and to hear
I
what
think
you
so.
just said.
And yeah, and again, thinking about the future, and again, not knowing how to get from the place I was to the place I knew I wanted to be was what ultimately spurred the decision. And it
Mm,
kept coming down to this big common denominator. Why am I not the person I want to be? And it kept coming back to that. It kept coming back to who I was when I was drinking. And again, it was very, very difficult because my friends were so, while they were supportive and they were
yeah.
like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And, oh, you really think you have a problem? Well, what do you think? What about me? It would always
Exactly.
come back to that. Like, if you have a problem, then I have a problem, and then you don't have a problem. So, and it wasn't a judgment on them. I mean, I certainly tried to still hang out and, and go out as much as I could. But, it got to the point where a lot of times it just, that maintaining that kind of a lifestyle wasn't sustainable anymore. So
Right.
they either had to take me as I was, or I was doing other things and finding new people to hang out with. I was very, very fortunate at the time. My now husband was my then boyfriend,
Okay. Wow.
and he was, never had been a drinker, and was very, very supportive of this decision, and
Nice.
never once had said to me while I was drinking, I think you have a problem and you need to
Hmm.
stop. There was never, and I had a couple of my friends say, oh, is he the reason? Is he the reason why? Did he make you do this? And I was like, no, actually, he loved me even then, like when I was that person that I didn't want to be. And so for me to now see us come full circle, we'll be married 16 years in September.
Oh,
It's
congratulations.
really, yeah, I think a lot of what we have in our relationship is based off of that decision that I made 20 years ago. So
20 years ago. Yeah. And you
yeah,
made a statement when we were first talking before we recorded that you're such a different person now, that
yeah,
it's changed everything. Can you
yeah.
touch on that? Like how that has impacted you moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, when I stopped drinking, it became less about me. I was a less self-centered person. I was a
Ah,
less self-absorbed person, worried about my own fun and trying to generate my own good time and everything. And it became more about, how do I shift the focus away from me into other people? And it coincided with my starting my career in medicine. And
yes.
these decisions kind of came almost back to back on top of one another. Stopping drinking, enrolling in nursing school. It was probably within a month of each other that I did all this. And that, I think, sometimes I think, oh, that was serendipitous. And then I think, no, no, that was very much by design. That was
Yeah.
an intentional choice to choose a career that was going to be about me needing to be my best so that I could help other people. And that every time I go to work, it's not about me making money. It's not about me feeding some adrenaline rush, which there, I had to admit, in the trauma ICU, there was a little bit of that.
I bet.
But it was about helping other people and being at my best by 6:30 every single morning to get on my shift, and knowing that, you can't be going out late at night all the time like that if you're going to come in and then respond to a code blue at 7:30 after you clock in. So
Now you
I
knew
wanted,
that, but it was probably a lot of drinking going on in medical school as well, right? Around you.
oh, Well, and I was in my NP program at the time, and yeah, certainly, just as a social outlet alone, there was a lot of
Hmm.
that, and I think that touches a lot on the way we depend on alcohol for for almost a crutch or a stress reliever or a way to escape some of the things that you see in the ER, which can be very, very upsetting and disturbing. It's hard to bring that stuff home. But that said, it was ultimately something that when I threw myself into this career, it took my focus away from the fact that, oh, I'm not drinking like that anymore. And now this is what I'm going to do. And, I went to Marymount University in Northern Virginia, and there was a internship that we did in Belize. And we went and did, we were serving an underserved community there of people that had nothing, and to have a perspective outside of what we see here in the United States, we are so very privileged. I mean, if you think
Yes.
about a lot of the alcohol issues that we have, I mean, can we trace a lot of it back to a culture, in some cases, of overindulgence or
Hmm.
of plentitude, and I don't know if that's the word, but I think that's a lot of it too, and this illusion that we can only have a good life if we're having fun. We can only relax if it's there, and certainly when I went down there, and we were down there for about a month, and these people live a genuinely happy life, and they have a lot of times next to nothing. You would come home. I remember coming home and just to have ice or air conditioning or a bed with a mattress, shoes to walk outside in. I mean, those were the kind of basics. So again, my career helped me through that transition of, going from drinking to sobriety, by helping focus on other people and not so much about, oh, this woe is me, I can't have fun anymore.
Yeah.
No, it's, you can still have fun, but let's make this not
So
so much about Castle.
yeah, I'm hearing you say you are practicing gratitude. So you got this perspective, and then
Mhm.
you're grateful for what you have. So, and that's such a big thing I talk to with my clients and practice for myself is gratitude, because when we're
Yeah.
drinking, it's like we're trying to find something or fill some void or get some experience that is just so empty or very short lived, certainly. And when you practice gratitude, like you're talking about, that makes all the difference. But
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to something that I just think is so impressive that I know you gloss over. But here you are, 23, you tell your friends you're stopping, and they do something that's very common that people now do all the time, whether you're 23 or 65 and your friend tells you they're going to stop drinking. They're like, what does that mean for me? Because you
Yeah.
hold up this unintentional mirror to them, and so their response is never
Right.
really about you. It's about
Right.
how it makes them feel. And I know when I was drinking and I'd run into somebody who's like, I'm taking a break or whatever, I'd be like, oh, well, I'm not hanging out with you, because I felt threatened. My drinking was threatened. So talk about that a little bit, because what strategies did you use? How did you get through that?
Yeah. And I will say this, I was in a fortunate situation again with my then boyfriend, now
Hmm.
husband, who was like just my guy, and I was really, really lucky because he was never a drinker. But I have to say, they I don't want it to make it sound like they dropped me like a hot potato. They
Hmm.
certainly didn't, and respected my decision, but it was a lot of pressure as to
Yeah.
why, and what are you going to, are you still going to come, and are you, do we need to, are we okay to drink around you? I mean, there was a lot of that too. And I will say, sometimes you do feel like the odd man out, and that was
Oh,
that
yeah.
was difficult as a young person, almost a, not, certainly not ostracized, but a curiosity more than anything. Like, oh, there, or I'd run into people who hadn't seen me in a while, and they'd be like, there's our girl, there's our party girl. But no, not this time. Like, oh, that's interesting. Wow, Castle had enough. Like, it was always this kind of
Right.
curiosity, I think. And then would come the mirror that you referenced of like, well, I mean, you don't really have a problem, Castle. Like, you're not doing anything different than the rest of us. And it's like, yeah, well, it's a personal choice, and that's ultimately what it would come down to. I navigated it pretty well, I think, by continuing
Yeah.
to show up at stuff. I'd always bail a little early. I'd have
Yes.
an
There's your
early exit.
strategy.
I'd have,
Hmm.
yep, either Garrett would be with me and we'd be like, we're heading back out, or I would, I'd be like, gosh, I have an early shift tomorrow. I'd
Hmm.
check the clock and be like, oh, I gotta go. And I'd always have something like a Diet Coke with a lime in it. You know what I mean? And that staved off a lot of the questions too. And between you and me, I still had fun. I still
Yeah.
danced. I still sang along to songs. I still acted goofy and, waved my ponytail around. And, it wasn't that far off. It was just, I was still who I wanted to be. I was still the version of I was holding true to the version of Kastle that I wanted to be.
And
And
was that a surprise to you that you could be that person at
yes,
first?
a
Yeah.
shock.
Yes.
A shock. I didn't know it was there. I didn't, and I
Yeah.
think because I was so young and went through all these formative years as someone who really enjoyed drinking and partying, I didn't know. I didn't know who I was, and it took the removal of the alcohol to find her. To say that's what I was missing. She's there all along.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people, if they haven't had a chance to see, and again, maybe it's different for people that are now in their 40s and considering quitting alcohol. I'm sure that a lot of them really feel like they know who they are, and alcohol maybe isn't a big part of it. But I mean,
No, actually, that's why I want to highlight this point, because
Mhm.
the clients I work with are anywhere from 50 to 70, and they're still struggling with those same issues. What will my friends think? How will I go to a party? How will I go to a wedding? How can I dance?
Yeah,
What do I do? So everything you just said was amazing. You surrounded yourself with some people who didn't drink, like your boyfriend.
right.
And you also started to find other friends. And then when you went to the party, you had something, an alcohol-free
Yep.
substitute. You went
Yep.
early when people were in the early drinking, and then
Yeah.
you had a plan to cut out. Like everything you did is exactly what I coach people on. And no, that's the shocking thing, is we're still dealing with it. And actually the drinking is getting, and you must see this in your medical profession, is binge drinking is increasing
Yes.
among women and
Mhm.
50 and up. So it is very difficult for people at this age, and they don't always know who they are without
Yeah.
drinking. It's
Yeah.
scary.
It is. It
Mm-hmm.
is. And I definitely found a way to make it work for me at the time, not knowing a lot of this stuff. And
Yeah.
again, I did have support. I mean, I had the AA meetings that I had been going to. I phased out of those after about 5, 6 years, and I had support with people there. I had
Yeah.
a sponsor, a dear, dear woman who still to this day, I've kind of fallen out of touch with, but I still every now and then will maintain some texting with her. She read a psalm in our wedding, when Garrett and I got married.
Aw.
But yeah, she was always there. And really also I became that person, that friend that my drinking friends then said, hey, can you
Yes.
make sure that we don't do anything crazy? Can you make sure we all get home okay? And I can't tell you how many situations I bailed people out of just
Mm-hmm.
having eyes on friends. So you almost get a new, I don't want to call it like a street cred, but like, if you're a trusted person for your friends now too. And so there was a value to that, there were not just to my friends, but for me, I felt good
Yeah.
knowing, okay, like, I don't have to police them, but if I'm there, I can kind of like make sure that I've got the blinders on them and that they're gonna, not screw anything up too badly either. So, but yeah. And then getting back to my AA experience, just to touch
Yes.
on that, I wish I had known that there was an option like what you do, and at the time I didn't look into it. It wasn't well known that there could be other options
Yeah.
besides
I
either
don't
you
think there
just
really
cold turkey.
was actually at your time. I don't think there really was. Yeah.
I don't think so. Yeah. And
Mm-mm.
so, I remember going in there and turning around at the door of the first meeting that I was about to walk into. I was so nervous. And I felt like I don't belong here. There's all these people. I'm 23. Everyone walking in like is, AARPH. Like this is not right for me. And as I was leaving, a woman was running in late, and this ended up being my sponsor. She grabbed me by the hand and was like, "Where are you going?" I was like, "Oh
That's
no,
good.
I can't. I'm not supposed to be here. Like this doesn't feel right." She's like, "Just come in. Just come in and sit with me, and you're going to be
Yeah.
fine." And she grabbed me by the hand and took me inside, and I, thank her every day for that gesture, of
Yes.
kindness and putting herself out there. So that experience, AA had a huge value for me, and that it
Yes.
taught me that you can be honest about your drinking and your threshold for what your rock bottom is. It might not be someone else's. I mean,
Right.
I didn't hurt anyone in a car accident.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't, do anything negligent to my family or my kids or anything, but it was my own rock bottom. And everyone has to find where theirs is. And if You wake up one morning and you say, you know what, I've had enough.
Right.
I, maybe had a slip of the tongue last night, put my foot in my mouth. Maybe
Hmm.
that's your rock bottom, and
Yeah.
maybe you try this. But it doesn't have to be necessarily through AA, because there's a
Yeah.
lot of comparing out that can happen when you're,
Well, I
maybe.
think AA is wonderful if it works with your central nervous system and that works for you. My best friend, who we started drinking together at the same age at 14, we also
Mhm.
decided to stop drinking at the same age in our
Oh, wow.
50s, and she went the AA route and I went coaching, and we talk about it all the time. So it's great that there are many different options and that works with whatever, works for you. So I just think
Right.
it's, again, incredible that you did all this as a young person. And
Yeah.
so how does that affect you moving forward now as a healthcare professional and even as a mother? You must be,
Yeah.
I know your kids are young, but
Yeah.
you must be thinking about,
Yeah.
what's coming up
Crosses our
ahead of
mind.
you.
Yeah. And we, and we certainly don't want to dangle that as this forbidden fruit.
Right.
It's not in our home unless people that don't know Garrett and I drink will bring us a gift or something of wine at a dinner party. But I think by now it's been long enough that our friends and family mostly know that Garrett and I just don't drink, and it's become so normalized at this point, that we do have to say to ourselves, wow, our kids won't find out about it through us here in our home. They're not going to see us drinking. They're not going to watch us come home from work and crack a beer or open a bottle of wine. So, and I don't want them judging people that do that, but I
Right.
also want them having an awareness of
Hmm.
what that is and what that isn't, and the dangers that are very real. And as a healthcare provider, you mentioned, I can speak to that.
Hmm.
I have so many patients that I try to have this conversation with, and I think most people are open to hearing. I always everybody, how much do you drink? You can be honest with me and tell me. I don't have to multiply the number by 2 or 10 or whatever it is we do in the ER. How many drinks a day? How many drinks a week? And then I'll segue into, truthfully, there is no safe amount. The medical community
Yes.
is in consensus that there isn't a safe amount of alcohol for you to use. So you need to determine if it's worth it for you. And most people say, yeah, it is. It's worth it for me. I get relaxation out of it. I like the stress relief. I like the effervescent feeling. That's mostly what it comes down to. But when
Sure.
we get to a point where we're looking at elevated liver enzymes and we're
Hmm.
looking at elevated triglyceride levels, and I've diagnosed you with a fatty liver and we've confirmed that on an ultrasound, that's really, really difficult to back out of. And that can have really long term lasting implications for health if it's gotten to that point. And for a lot of these people, they don't view themselves, nor would society classify them as problem drinkers.
Right.
These are casual drinkers. These aren't necessarily people that would say they have a problem. And they probably, frankly, don't. But if we get your labs back, and this is the only reason we can identify, we've eliminated every other possible cause of this, is that you're drinking every day, even if it's just 1 to 2
Hmm.
glasses of wine. We
Yeah.
need to stop,
Yeah.
we
So
need to
let's
have you
break that down a little bit, because it's that whole, first of all, the alcohol industry, right? The marketing, it's huge. And the alcohol industry has been big sponsors of moderate drinking is good for you. When you really dig deep and you see who is behind many of these studies, most of these
Sure.
studies, even ones at NIH, it's the
Yeah.
alcohol industry. And they want
Yeah.
to promote that moderate drinking is good. But the studies, the scientific studies, are coming out and saying, as you just said, there is no safe amount.
Mhm.
And the kind of person I deal with is the gray area drinker. So if you're drinking
Sure.
more than 1 or 2 drinks a week, you're in the gray. And if you're, so I don't deal with people who need medical intervention, or I don't want to say I don't deal with them, but that's not who I coach. I'm in the gray. And that's
Yeah.
like 99% of people are,
Yeah.
drinking in the gray. Well, I drink moderately. Yes, you do. And again, the alcohol industry has really made us think, look, if you don't hit rock bottom, and what we mean by rock bottom is you can't work, you're losing your family, you're losing your friends, then you don't have any reason to take a look at how you're drinking. And you're yet sharing, but wait, I'm actually seeing medical, information, data, statistics, numbers that actually, if you would take a break from drinking or stop drinking altogether, this would really benefit your health, even if you
Absolutely.
drink moderately. But
Absolutely.
it's a
Yeah. And
hard message to sell.
it is such a hard message to sell. And there's definitely a culture, as you mentioned, especially with women,
Hmm.
our age and everything, the mommy wine culture
Hmm.
and everything too, this almost dependence on it to get through just the day to day minutiae of having a family and young kids and
Yeah.
everything. And again, I mean this not to pass any judgment at
Yeah.
all, but I want people to be aware that it's not as benign as it might
Oh,
seem, or
no.
as society makes it out to be. We can get through baby showers, weddings,
Yeah.
bachelorette parties, graduations without alcohol. And what if we did, and we all were better versions of ourselves that we just
Hmm.
didn't know were there all along?
Yeah.
I had a patient the other day, my age, in her low 40s, two young kids, said to me, I had, at the beginning of the summer, I decided to stop drinking. And at first it was just for a week. And then I said, I wonder if I can do this for the month of June. And then got all the way through June. It felt so good that she
Yes.
added all the way through July. And I just saw her this past week, and she said, I'm coming up on 90 days and I'm not going back. I feel
That's
better
great.
than I ever have in my entire life. I've lost weight. I've had the cleanest, most authentic summer of my life,
Mm.
and enjoyed my family to a degree that I never have before. And that just resonated so much with me. I mean, and this wasn't someone that I had pinpointed with terrible
Right.
lab work. She just said, I don't want it in my life anymore. I don't
Yeah.
want to feel like I need it. And I want to see what I can do. And it was her version of maybe running a marathon. I want to see if I can do it. So,
Yeah.
and she did. And she's like, I feel so great. She said the other day she went on a girls' trip, and her husband, when she got home, said to her, did you drink? And she said, no, actually, I didn't. I didn't have a single drink. I had
Amazing.
non-alcoholic. And he was happy for her.
Yes.
He wasn't excited that she had finally broken her streak. He was like, and he still drinks,
He's
but he was
proud of
like,
her.
I am so glad that you
Yeah.
didn't. I'm happy for you. I'm
Yeah.
happy for us, because he likes the version that they are kind of transitioning into.
Yeah. I mean, let's talk about that. Do you see, and I know personally, I felt it was increasing my depression. I'm a person who has depression, and it was exacerbating it, and it was causing me anxiety, insomnia, irritability, gut issues. I could go on. And these aren't even the numbers you're looking at, but these are like tangible things. And people just
Right.
start to get used to it. They're like, I guess this is just how I feel. But
Mhm.
no, it's actually moderate drinking alcohol that causes that.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I have patients all the time too that will come in with, a grief response, and they've been
Hmm.
drinking more than they should. And as you referenced, the degree to which that excessive alcohol consumption, even if it's just for a short period of time, a temporary thing that they're going through, it exacerbates the depression, the anxiety, the sleeplessness tenfold. It really
Yeah.
is. It's a central nervous system depressant.
Depressant.
It amplifies those feelings of negativity. It
Yeah.
makes the bottom fall out. So I try my very best in those moments to, again, without being judgy or anything, what else can we be doing right now? You cannot turn to this as a solution. It's only going to make things worse.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's never going to be an answer. And I think that's ultimately some of the things that I try to counsel patients on too. What other things can we focus on instead to help you get through this? Is it a medication? Is it a lifestyle change? Can we substitute the alcohol with another focus?
Yes.
And I think a lot of people are surprised when they're in that gray area of moderate drinking, that it's easier than they thought it would be. The biggest barrier that I see patients having is really that social barrier,
Yes.
or
That's the
the
biggest.
dynamic with their spouse,
Hmm.
of that's he's my husband. That's what we do together.
That's
It's
how
my
we
TV.
met. Yes.
Yes. Like, how I don't know what our relationship looks like if that's not in it. So that's scary. That's scary to rock the boat like that. That's
I went
huge.
through that. Yeah.
Right. Right.
John and I
Yes.
met drinking, at Penn State, big drinkers at Penn State. We met afterwards at a bar. And you hear that from so many people. We met in a bar, especially like in the 80s or the 90s. That's how we met. And when I came to this decision, I thought, well, how are we going to relate? This is what we do together. So I had to have lots of conversations and lots of communication. And like your patient, my husband was very supportive of my decision because he did see the anxiety and the depression, and he sees a huge difference in me now. So he still drinks, but he drinks so much less because
Yeah.
I would drive that train, of drinking
Sure.
more. So um, yeah, it's a big question in my relationship, social, but it's when you go through it. So you have to actually go through the experience. You can tell yourself all the knowledge. Okay, we know that alcohol is a toxin. Alcohol is related to 7 different types of cancer. Alcohol, I'd be better off if I didn't drink it. That's all knowledge, but you have to go through, like your patient did, 30 days, 60 days,
Right.
and 90 days is really when you can feel a big difference. So that's what I try to
Mhm.
encourage people to do, is be curious, like you said earlier, and start
Mhm.
being aware of your drinking
Right.
habits. Like, are you driving home and thinking about pouring that drink?
Right.
Yes, most people are
Right.
already thinking about it, and you're already getting that dopamine hit before you even pour that drink, because your
Yeah.
brain has gotten so used to it. So it's just, it's so interesting when you learn about the brain chemistry and habit
Mhm.
change, and you take
Right.
away the fear by helping people become more aware and curious, instead of willpower and beating themselves up, but like your patient did, like, let me just try this.
Yeah. Why
Let me
not?
just see. Like, what have you got to lose?
Nothing. Exactly. You have nothing to lose. You have nothing to lose. Yeah. And I like to do, sometimes if I have the ability to do it, I'll do quarterly lab checks on patients. And if they've
Ah,
really cut back on their alcohol intake, the marked difference that we see in these lab metrics from the before and after a 90-day window of time, it really is possible to reduce the amount of stress you're putting on your liver, your cholesterol profile. You can bring these numbers down by eliminating that one thing, or even just cutting it back dramatically. If people are able to do that, we see a huge reduction. And it only behooves you from a medical standpoint to cut it out. There really is no good place for it there. Um, and
that's
just to
powerful. Do you do that as a program? Do you say, let's take your baseline and go 90 days and
Typically not. So what I'll do is, when I'm screening patients and I get their lab work back and it shows some indication that maybe alcohol is playing a factor in the way some of these liver enzymes look, in the way that we're seeing some cholesterol build up, certain types of cholesterol, or maybe we've done a coronary calcium score and there's plaque buildup there, and we've got patients on the right medications they need to be on. What other things can we do to improve your labs? So, and your chances of not dying of a cardiac event, or having a needing a liver transplant. Um, how much do you drink? That's the next question I always ask. Tell me a little bit about your drinking habits and what kind of alcohol. And truthfully, there's not one that's better than another from a medical
no.
standpoint. I mean, I've had patients say, "Oh, but
Yeah.
I only drink beer," or I'll only have, I don't drink hard liquor. It's only wine. It doesn't matter. Your liver is still filtering that in the same
Alcohol
way.
is alcohol is alcohol. It's a toxin. As soon as
Exactly.
it goes in your body says, uh-oh, that toxin is coming in my body.
And I remember in your presentation how you referenced it as one of those, I can't remember what you called it, something about a certain type of drug.
It's a
A
dirty
dirty
drug.
drug. A dirty drug. Yes, and it crosses at the barrier of everything, the
Hmm.
placental barrier, the blood-brain barrier. It goes into every
Yes.
cell. There's
Every
nothing
cell.
spared. Yeah. So, truly bathing your insides in this, and all of your organs get a dose of it. So, and we'll explore that with patients when their labs
Yes.
come back, and I'll say, if you can cut back on this, your levels are going to improve in 3 months. Can you stop 3 months? And then we'll check again. We do quarterly checks in our practice, oftentimes for patients who have labs that don't look right. And when they've stopped it altogether, the vast majority of patients, we see a significant improvement. And a lot of times it means they maybe don't need to take a med, or I can start backing off some other prescriptions that they're already taking full
Right.
dose of. Maybe can we try a half dose for a while? If you're able to maintain these levels, we'll keep checking. But if you're able to do this on your own, we don't want to keep you on medication. We want you to be able to, live without this stuff. So yeah, so
That's
we
powerful.
definitely, yeah, it is powerful when people see the results, when we can give them actual empirical data to look
Hmm.
at, and they've done the hard work, and we say, look, your liver's happy now. It's not sending out these stressed enzyme levels, through the roof. They get so happy. So it's great. Yeah. And I don't mean to scare people either. That's definitely not an
That
approach,
doesn't
but
work. Scaring people doesn't work.
no, it really doesn't. Yeah, that's and that's just not my personality. And
Right.
I don't open up a whole lot. I like to maintain a certain degree of
Sure.
professional boundary at work. But if there's a patient in there that I know I'm going to connect with, or someone who maybe be in a similar situation to me, that's a story that every now and then I have opened up
Hmm.
about and told them my my personal choice not to. And, and I think that resonates too, when you're not just preaching to somebody about something, you're actually
Yes.
walking the walk too. So
Yes.
that helps a lot, and to be able to tell people you're going to be okay. You are, trust yourself. You have everything you need. You're going to be all right through this.
I think it's absolutely imperative that it's someone they know has walked this walk. That makes a big difference. And many doctors, this is kind of a sticky subject, and nurses are gray area drinkers, right?
Yes.
So
oh yes.
they're also using it for stress relief. And so it's kind of a hard conversation to have. And not all doctors and nurse practitioners and nurses are asking these questions.
Right, exactly. And again, I think that goes back to the mirror that you referenced. It's hard to tell somebody not to do something that you might be going home and doing on your own.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge for sure. And I think moving forward as our kids do get older, I know you had touched on that a couple minutes back about how we're going to approach that with the kids, but I would probably start. I don't want to be too clinical with them, but definitely start from a point of like, again, this really isn't this. There's nothing good about this that this will bring you. And if you want to know who you are, if you don't want to go through difficult moments impaired, if you want to see what you're capable of doing as a human being, I don't know that you don't need this. There may not be a role for this in your life. And I'm here to tell you that you can certainly live a joyful and full and thriving life without it. And that's what I want my kids to see. And do we have bad days? Absolutely. I have miserable days, just like everybody has. But I don't need a crutch to be able to get through it. And again, if I had, it'd be different if I had a diagnosis of something. I don't, I'm fortunate enough to not, need to rely on any depressants or anything, but I rely a lot on when I do have those bad moments, or when I have any feelings of doubt, anxiety, depression, like everybody else gets. For me, exercise has become the way that I live, sober and fit. That for me is my SSRI. And that's, I get so much out of that. I get a lot out of my women's hockey community. I've really thrown myself into that.
I wanted to ask you about that, about what do you do for your sober fit living? And so you beat me to the question. So I want to hear about that. The ice hockey, you grew up in California. How'd that happen?
Well, it didn't in California. It took meeting my husband out here, Garrett, on the East Coast. He's my hockey player. And that was one of the things that really, I remember one of our first dates that we ever went on was to the Smithsonian has that little ice rink on the mall, on the National Mall, that they freeze over. And we were in DC at school, and he said, "Let's go ice skating. Do you know how to ice skate?" Said, yeah. And he came after work. He was working at a lobbying firm on K Street, and came in a suit and tie and had his hockey skates like slung over his shoulder.
Adorable.
And I was like, oh, wow, he's so cute. And then he put him on, and he's skating around this rink with his hands in his pockets like he's like Fred Astaire on ice skates.
This is a movie.
That's amazing. Yeah. And as the years went by and we had kids, after my second was born, I was really down. I was just in a funk. I had, gained a little weight. I still had the postpartum weight. And my second son was only 6 months old. And Garrett said, "I think you should take up hockey. I think that would be really, really good for you." And I was like, "God, you're crazy. I don't think that that's something I could ever do." He lent me all his equipment, and I started going to these skill sessions for beginner adults. Now, you'd be surprised to know in our area, there is a very robust community of adult beginner hockey players. And there's a lot of availability for, lessons and skating and skill sessions and everything. So that's how it all started. And then, I got good enough to be on a team, and it ended up starting a team. It just kind of snowballed from there. Marathon running too. And I've only done 2 marathons, but that was another way for me to push it and see what I was capable of doing physically. And I don't think I would have been able to work full time, breastfeed a baby, do any of those things, take care of 2 kids, if I was still drinking. There's no way I could have gotten the runs in or committed myself to any of that stuff. There's no way. Through activity and through the exercise, it's given me a lot of personal fulfillment, and autonomy, and just a feeling of power, that I don't need anything. I have everything I need,
you use a good word, because alcohol, and it's actually been sold to us from the alcohol industry as empowering for women, but is actually disempowering in so many ways. And we are, as women, starting to drink as much as men. and also starting to experience the same health problems as men from drinking. So I love how you use that word. You're doing other things, making other choices that are empowering, and helping people to see that actually alcohol is taking away from their health and affecting them mentally, physically, and you're substituting with other wonderful things. And ice hockey, that's just pretty badass, I think.
Thanks. Our team's really good too.
I had no
Yeah, we're
idea.
defending
Yeah.
champions. Go Osprey.
So what
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
you say to someone, or do you say to a patient,
Yeah.
or even some young people who might be listening to this and they're thinking, yeah, I'm drinking too much, but I don't know how to stop, and
Yeah.
I'm afraid, and older patients too are thinking this.
Right. Right. And I understand where that fear, the apprehension would come from, but I would just say if you think you've got a problem, you owe it to yourself to stop and eliminate this one thing. You're worth it. You're worth it. And you have what it takes inside of you to not need this. You are just as funny. You are just as much fun, and you can have just as much fun as you were having before, and be the authentic person that you're happy being, and be who you want to be. Alcohol's not giving you anything that you don't already have inside of you. You can still be goofy, silly, outgoing, courageous. You can be uninhibited. You can be all of those things, but not cross those moral lines and boundaries that you might have that keep you at your true north. You
Yeah.
don't need to violate your own personal moral code, to be funny, outgoing, all of those things. You have it in you already. You don't need it.
And those things
Um,
take practice. If you've been drinking for years and
right.
years and years, you may not be able to hear that right away. But like anything else, it takes practice for you to show yourself like, oh yeah, there she is. There he
Yeah.
is. He's in
Yeah.
there.
Give it to yourself for 30 days. Start with 30 and then see where it takes you from there. That would be my biggest piece of advice. And then don't ignore the health risks that are associated with even just a
Real.
small amount of alcohol. They're real. They're real. And every single time you drink, you're putting your body through it a little bit, and that can have a cumulative effect. So
Yes.
there is no such thing as a safe amount ultimately. And especially for teenagers where, your frontal lobe isn't even fully developed yet. It's really, there's a concern about the impulsivity that comes with that.
Yes.
Definitely, I remember in the trauma unit, much higher rates of drinking and driving. It was almost always men or teenage boys age 16 to 25. Those are our risk takers. And it's because that frontal lobe isn't developed yet. Give it a chance. Let your body develop without the influence of alcohol wherever possible. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that advice. That's great. So, and I'll put in the show notes where Kastle practices. So if you are in the Annapolis area and you want to maybe get a 90-day blood test, basic, and see,
Yes.
where you are and give it a try. I think that's a great idea. That's a great idea for a
Yeah,
program. So
absolutely. I love
anything else you
yeah.
want to share, Kastle? I loved hearing your story, and we could talk for a
Thank
long
you so
time, but
much. I want to again thank you for making this something that we can talk about. I mean, I'm just grateful to you for giving it a
thank you.
platform and for being brave enough to to make this your life's work. I think it's fantastic, and I admire you so much, and I'm grateful you've given me the courage to talk about my story and my journey with it, which now kind of to me seems like not that big of a deal, but
Oh, it's
it's
big.
well, thank you. And I
It
think
is.
if it can help anybody, then it's worth it to talk about
Yes.
it. So
Yeah.
thank you again so much.
Thank you so much. And I will look forward to seeing you in Annapolis soon.
Yes, likewise, Maureen.